snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, so I am here today to do a book review, and the book that I'm going to be reviewing is the third and final one in the Broken Empire Trilogy. This is by Mark Lawrence, and it's called Emperor of Thorns. I read this one back in May, I just haven't had the chance to review it yet, so I'm gonna be doing quite a few reviews today, and hopefully you guys will see them all coming up over the next few days. Emperor of Thorns, I thought it was a bit of a weird book, because I really enjoyed the second book in the series. The first one I enjoyed a lot, the second one I thought was even better, and then the third one I think was back down to the level of the first one, because even though I really enjoyed it and I enjoyed the direction that the book took overall, I felt like it was written in a way that you're supposed to be confused, and it definitely does that, because you don't really know what is reality, you don't really know if it's a dream, you don't really know if what you're reading is actually happening or just being imagined, and that happens a lot throughout the story. So you're always a little bit unsure about whether or not this is real, whether this is the past tense, whether this is modern current day events. You're not entirely sure a lot of the time, and that can mean that you get a little bit lost or confused at points in the story, which I did. It wasn't awful, like I wasn't completely out of my depth or anything like that by any means, but it was a little confusing, and I think it's intentional, but I just didn't love it as much as the second book, which had similar ideas, but I found it a lot easier to follow. I think it's due to the fact that we have multiple different plot lines, past tense and present day tense, and we also have dreams, and those three things you're not always entirely sure which one it is that you're reading. In this book we once again are following JORG, who is the main character, or JORG. I've been told so many times that I pronounce it wrong. JORG, I think, is how you're supposed to say it, but JORG is how I've always said it in my head, so I'm going to stick with JORG, but I do know that I'm saying it wrong. He has been the main character throughout all of the books so far, and he's quite an interesting character because he starts off his journey in the first book being quite nasty, quite brutal. He's raised in a kingdom and he is a prince, but he really dislikes his father after a tragic event happens with his mother and brother, and he doesn't really know how to cope with this or what to do, and so he kind of goes off on the wrong track in the first book, and he starts meeting people who are perhaps not that good for him and doing things that are rather gruesome and rather nasty. He's just a very dislikable character to begin with, but he's really interesting to read about, and as you go through the books in the first and second and now into the third one, you kind of get to know him a lot more. We know a lot more about his past, we know a lot more about where he comes from, and we know why he is the way that he is. We've understood his story, we've followed the journey that he's been on. So I do enjoy the fact that we've got the past tense storyline, because that does give us the backstory to him, and it really helps us to understand him a lot more. In this one we are following JORG as he tries to go on a big journey to try and make a name for himself and acquire a title. That's the first plotline that we're following, and this is the plotline that is the continuation of the ending of book 2, so we're following this. It's about a year or two after the ending of book 2 that this storyline begins to take place and shape up. This journey that he goes on, we find out that it's not really the norm, it's not really something that he would normally do, but it is something that JORG feels that he's destined to do. The second storyline is the 5 years earlier storyline, which is obviously detailing the past, and we get to see JORG as he's adventuring around the world. He goes to some very exotic places and visits some new cultures. We see him travelling with his brothers and also sometimes on his own, and we also get a lot of hints in that storyline about the Builders, who are this kind of race that we haven't had a whole lot of dealing with and we don't know an awful lot about, but we get a lot of hints about them. We find out a lot of their technology and things like this over the course of the book, so we don't know about them in the first book, but by the time we're in the third book we've had all these hints leading up to who they might be, what they were capable of, and we get to see more of that in this storyline, which I really enjoyed, because the Builders are certainly an area that interests me a lot. We then also have the dreams that JORG is having, and he definitely seems to have a lot of fever dreams. We're not always sure if his dreams are his own or whether they're being influenced by someone else, because that is possible within this world. We also get to see him dreaming about some of his more wild fantasies from his younger days. We see a lot of the brutality that he was exposed to, because he really was put into some rather gruesome and brutal situations when he was younger, and there were some moments that are quite dark, so just be warned. And we also get to see Catherine again as she walks in the dreams with JORG. One of the things that is a little bit crazy in this is that we've got sort of undead people, we've got sorcerers, and we've got dreamwalkers, and all sorts of things go on in this world. So there's a lot of magic, but it's not always that obvious, it's more subtle, and I enjoyed that a lot. Finally, the final storyline that we have is CHELLA's storyline, which I really enjoyed because we haven't seen a whole lot of her up until now, and in this storyline I feel like we really got to know her character a lot more. CHELLA is a sorcerer who works for the Dead King. She is a necromancer, essentially. Her storyline is also set in the present day, so we do see some interaction between her storyline and JORG's present day storyline. And I did like the fact that we had a zombie sort of vibe in this book with the Lichkin. That was really interesting to see, and CHELLA's storyline focuses a lot on that because obviously she's a necromancer. On the whole, I felt like it was a good ending. I felt like the events that we'd seen building up to were well resolved in the end, but actually the final ending, the very last bit of the book, was a little bit unsatisfactory for me. So I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it or anything like that. I still thought it was really well written. I think Mark Lawrence has some brilliant writing style where he can really bring you into the moment and he can really draw you into it and make you admire it and be there and feel as if you're in the situation. So I do love his writing style, and I love the way that he decided to take the book, but I didn't feel like the actual ending was how I wanted it to be right at the very end. Things did happen that I enjoyed, and then things happened that I was a bit like, slight cop-out. So, you know, on the whole, it was good, it was well written. Most of the book I really enjoyed. It was just the ending that slightly let it down for me, so I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's definitely a series that is worth reading. I will be continuing on with some of Mark Lawrence's other books in the future because I know he's writing another trilogy in the same world, I believe. So I definitely want to pick that up at some point. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, especially on the ending of the book if you've read it. Let me know your thoughts on the ending and whether or not you liked it, because I did it as a buddy read with Sam and Michael from Bitten by a Radioactive Book and Sam from Novels Are Nonsense. And Michael and Sam both had mixed opinions on the ending as well. So overall, it was a really interesting discussion, but I would love to hear what you guys think as well if you have read it. And if you've not read it, then let me know if you plan on picking up the series. So thank you guys all for watching, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little chat about the